My mother-in-law believed my job was ruining my marriage. I thought it was just passive-aggressive comments until my hospital launched an investigation against me and I realized someone was trying to force me out. My name is Kelly Green. I'm 34 and I work as a registered nurse at Riverbend Medical Center in Montgomery, Alabama. I've been married to Ryan for 6 years. Ryan's mom, Helen Green, never liked my job. She never said that directly. Helen prefers to dress criticism up as concern. The first year Ryan and I were married, it was small comments. Working again this weekend, Kelly? Or she'd glance at Ryan and say, "You must get tired of eating dinner alone." Then she'd smile like she was teasing. Ryan always brushed it off. "That's just how mom talks," he'd tell me. At first, I believed him. Healthcare schedules are rough. I knew that when I chose nursing. My shifts are 12 hours on paper, but they almost always run longer. Nights, weekends, holidays, it's just part of the job. Ryan understood that. Helen never did. Sunday dinners at Ryan's parents' house in Prattville slowly became something I dreaded. Helen would ask questions that didn't really sound like questions. "How many hours did you work this week, Kelly?" When I answered, she'd shake her head like I had admitted something embarrassing. "That's just not healthy for a marriage," she'd say. Ryan's dad, Thomas, would sit quietly at the table and focus on his food like he didn't hear any of it. Ryan usually tried to change the subject. But Helen never missed an opportunity. One night she said, "I just think couples should spend time together. Otherwise people start drifting apart." She said it while looking directly at me. I remember forcing a smile and saying, "Ryan and I are doing fine." Helen smiled back. "Oh, I'm sure you think that." The strange thing was Ryan didn't seem to notice how pointed the comments were. Or maybe he noticed and didn't want to believe it. Either way, I stopped bringing it up. Arguing about someone else's mother is a quick way to start fights in a marriage, and Ryan and I rarely fought. So I decided to ignore Helen's comments. For a while, that worked. Then 8 months ago, something happened at work that made everything feel different. I had just finished a long overnight shift in the emergency department. I was exhausted and halfway through my second cup of terrible hospital coffee when my supervisor, Maria Cross, walked into the break room. She looked at me in that careful way managers do when they're about to say something uncomfortable. "Kelly," she said, "can you come with me for a minute?" My stomach dropped. If you work in healthcare, you know that tone. It means something is wrong. I followed Maria down the hallway toward the administrative offices. She stopped outside a small conference room and opened the door. Inside was a man I recognized from hospital orientation, Daniel Ford from Human Resources. Both of them were already seated at the table. Maria gestured for me to sit down. The second I saw Daniel there, my brain went into panic mode. Had I made a mistake with a patient? Missed something on a chart? Given the wrong medication? In this job, even small mistakes can be serious. Daniel slid a printed sheet of paper across the table toward me. "We received a complaint about your conduct," he said calmly. I looked down at the page. It was an email. Anonymous. The message claimed I was careless with patients. It said I was distracted during shifts and spent time on my phone instead of paying attention to patient care. My chest tightened as I read it. None of it was true. Not even close. I'm the type of nurse who double-checks everything because the idea of making a mistake terrifies me. I looked up and said the first thing that came to my mind. "That's not accurate at all." Maria nodded immediately. "Your performance record is excellent," she said. "But we still have to investigate complaints like this." Daniel explained the process. They would review shift reports, security footage, and patient charts from the dates mentioned in the email. Standard procedure. Still, my hands were shaking slightly as the meeting ended. Even if the complaint was false, investigations like that can follow you around. In healthcare, your reputation matters. For the next week, I felt like I was walking around with a weight on my chest. Every shift felt tense. I kept wondering who would send something like that. It didn't sound like a patient. It didn't sound like a coworker either. The email mentioned things that felt personal. My schedule. My overnight shifts. Even my husband's name. That part bothered me the most. Because the person who wrote it clearly knew details about my life. A week later, Maria called me back into her office. She smiled the moment I walked in. "Everything checks out," she said. "The investigation found nothing wrong with my work. No policy violations. No complaints from patients. No evidence supporting the email." Relief washed over me so quickly I almost laughed. "Good," I said quietly. Maria leaned back in her chair. "Sometimes anonymous complaints happen," she said. "Usually they don't go anywhere." I nodded, trying to move past the whole thing. And for a couple weeks I did. Until a dinner at Ryan's parents' house made something click in a way I couldn't ignore. We were sitting around Helen's dining table one Sunday evening. The usual setup, Helen serving food, Thomas quietly eating, Ryan trying to keep the conversation light. Helen suddenly looked at me and said, "You know, I read something interesting the other day." I glanced up from my plate. "Oh." She nodded thoughtfully. "It said nurses who work too many hours can become unsafe with patients." The words hit me like a cold splash of water. For a second, I just stared at her. That comment felt strangely specific. Ryan frowned slightly. Mom, where did you read that? Helen waved her hand casually. Oh, somewhere online. I just worry about people who push themselves too hard. Then she looked directly at me and added, hospitals should really pay closer attention to that kind of thing. Something about the way she said it made my stomach twist. At the time, I told myself I was overthinking it. But that comment stayed in the back of my mind for days. Then a few days later, I received an email from the hospital's IT department. And that's when everything changed. The email from IT came 3 days after that dinner at Helen's house. At first, I almost ignored it. Hospital departments send random emails all the time, policy reminders, password resets, things like that. But the subject line caught my attention. Follow-up regarding HR complaint investigation. My chest tightened a little as I opened it. The message was from Chris Stone, one of the IT security analysts at Riverbend Medical Center. I had seen him around before but never really spoken to him. The email was short. He explained that as part of closing the HR investigation, their department had tried to trace where the anonymous complaint email came from. Apparently, they do that sometimes when accusations involve patient safety. At the bottom of the message was a line that made my hands go cold. They had identified the IP address the complaint was sent from. It came from a residential internet connection in Prattville, Alabama. I stared at the screen for a long moment. Prattville is where Ryan's parents live. At first, I told myself that meant nothing. Prattville isn't tiny. Thousands of people live there. But then I scrolled down and read the next sentence. The internet provider confirmed the connection was registered to a specific household. The Green residence. I read that line 3 times. For a second, I actually wondered if I was misunderstanding it somehow. Maybe it was a mistake. Maybe the system was wrong. But the more I thought about it, the more my stomach started twisting. There was only one reason someone at that house would know my hospital schedule. Or Ryan's name. I sat at my kitchen table for almost 5 minutes just staring at my laptop. Part of me wanted to pretend I hadn't seen the email. Because if what I was thinking was true, it meant something I didn't want to deal with. Ryan came home about an hour later. He walked into the apartment still carrying his laptop bag from work. You're home early, he said. I was still sitting at the table. Ryan, I said quietly. Can you look at something? He walked over and leaned down next to me while I turned the laptop screen toward him. He read the email slowly. Then he read it again. That doesn't make sense, he said. I nodded. That's what I thought too. Ryan straightened up and ran a hand through his hair, something he does when he's trying to process something complicated. There has to be some mistake, he said. Maybe, I said. But neither of us sounded convinced. Ryan sat down across from me. You're saying this email complaint came from my parents' house? That's what IT says. Ryan frowned. My dad barely knows how to send a text message. I almost laughed at that because it was true. Thomas Green is the type of man who still prints directions instead of using GPS. Ryan kept staring at the laptop screen. After a minute he said, maybe someone used their internet somehow. Like a neighbor or something. I didn't answer right away. Because something else had started replaying in my head. That dinner conversation. Helen saying hospitals should pay closer attention to nurses who work too much. Ryan must have noticed my expression. What? He asked. I hesitated. Then I said, your mom said something strange the other night. Ryan looked up. What do you mean? I repeated the conversation from dinner. Word for word. Ryan listened quietly. When I finished, he leaned back in his chair. Okay, he said slowly. That's weird, right? Ryan was quiet for a moment. Then he pulled his phone out of his pocket. What are you doing? I asked. I'm calling her. Ryan. But he was already dialing. The phone rang twice before Helen answered. I could hear her voice faintly through the speaker. Hi, sweetheart, she said warmly. Ryan didn't waste time. Mom, I need to ask you something. Of course. Ryan glanced at me briefly before speaking again. Did you send an email to Kelly's hospital? There was a pause on the other end of the line. Not a short pause. A long one. The kind that immediately makes your stomach sink. Finally, Helen said, what are you talking about? Ryan's voice stayed calm. The hospital traced an anonymous complaint email. It came from your internet connection. Another pause. Then Helen laughed softly. Well, that can't be right. Ryan didn't laugh. Mom. Silence again. I could feel my pulse beating in my ears. Ryan said it more directly this time. Did you send an email about Kelly to her hospital? This time the silence lasted even longer. When Helen finally spoke again, her voice sounded different. Less cheerful. Well, I might have reached out to someone, she said. My chest tightened. Ryan leaned forward slightly. What do you mean you reached out? Helen sighed like we were the ones being unreasonable. I was just concerned. Concerned about what? Ryan, honey, she said gently, Kelly works too much. You know that. Ryan stared at the phone like he couldn't believe what he was hearing. So you contacted her hospital? I just thought someone should take a look at her schedule. My stomach dropped. Ryan's voice hardened. You filed a complaint about her patient care. Well, I didn't phrase it like that, Helen said quickly. Ryan looked at me. I could see the anger starting to build in his face. Mom, he said slowly, you accused my wife of being negligent with patients. Helen made a small dismissive sound. Oh, don't be dramatic. Ryan's jaw tightened. That investigation could have cost her job. Helen replied in a calm voice that made everything worse. If that happened, maybe it would have been for the best. The room went completely silent. Ryan stared at the phone like he had just heard something he couldn't process. What did you just say? He asked quietly. Helen sounded almost relieved to finally say it out loud. I just think Kelly's career is putting a strain on your marriage. My hands felt cold. Ryan spoke again, slower this time. So your solution was to try to get her fired? I didn't try to get her fired, Helen said. I simply thought if the hospital looked into things, they might reduce her hours. Ryan stood up from the table. I had never seen him look this angry before. Mom, he said, do you realize how insane that sounds? Helen's voice sharpened. I'm trying to help you. You're sabotaging my wife. I'm protecting your marriage. Ryan let out a short laugh that didn't sound amused at all. You almost destroyed her career. Helen replied calmly. Well, if that happened, maybe it would have been a blessing in disguise. That was the moment something in Ryan changed. I could see it on his face. The disbelief disappeared. What replaced it was something much colder. And the next thing he said completely changed the direction of our family. Ryan didn't raise his voice. That's the thing I remember most. He didn't yell. He didn't argue. He just stood there holding the phone, staring at the wall like something inside his head had finally snapped into place. Mom, he said quietly, listen carefully. Helen was still talking, like she hadn't noticed the shift in his tone. I just don't understand why you're both overreacting. I was looking out for you. Kelly's schedule is unhealthy for a marriage. Someone had to step in. Ryan cut her off. You accused my wife of being unsafe with patients. I never said unsafe. You filed a complaint that triggered an investigation, Ryan said. That's exactly what you did. Helen sighed again, the same tired sigh she used every time she thought we were being unreasonable. I didn't realize hospitals would take it so seriously. Ryan stared down at the floor for a second. Then he said something I had never heard him say before. You need to stop talking. Helen went quiet. Ryan took a breath. What you did was malicious, he said. You tried to damage Kelly's career because you don't like her schedule. That's not fair. It is fair, Ryan said. For the first time since the call started, Helen sounded slightly nervous. Ryan, sweetheart. No, he interrupted. He walked over to the window and looked out at the street below our apartment. You crossed a line. Helen tried to laugh it off. Oh, please. Families argue about things all the time. Ryan shook his head slowly. This isn't an argument. There was a long pause. Then Ryan said the words I don't think Helen ever expected to hear. Until you apologize to Kelly and understand what you did, we're done. Silence. I could hear Helen breathing through the phone. You're not serious, she said. I am. You're choosing your wife over your own mother? Ryan didn't hesitate. Yes. Another long silence. Helen's voice changed again, this time sharper. I was trying to help you. That girl barely spends time at home. Ryan turned back toward the table. Her name is Kelly, he said. And she works harder than anyone I know. Helen scoffed. Well, maybe if she spent less time at that hospital and more time being a wife. Ryan ended the call. Just like that. He didn't say goodbye. He didn't argue. He just pressed the button and set the phone down on the table. For a moment, neither of us said anything. The apartment felt strangely quiet. Ryan rubbed his face with both hands. Wow, he muttered. I didn't even know what to say. Part of me felt angry. Another part felt weirdly relieved that the truth was finally out. Ryan sat down across from me again. I'm sorry, he said. For what? For not seeing it sooner. I shook my head. You didn't know she'd do something like this. Ryan let out a quiet breath. I should have known something was off. We sat there for a while, just processing everything. Eventually Ryan picked up his phone again. What are you doing? I asked. I'm texting her. He typed for a few seconds. Then he turned the screen so I could read it. The message said, what you did was unacceptable. Until you apologize to Kelly and understand how serious this was, we won't be seeing you. He hit send. A few minutes later Helen responded. The message was exactly what I expected. I can't believe you're both attacking me when I was only trying to help. Ryan read it, shook his head, and locked his phone. She doesn't get it, he said. No, I replied quietly. She probably never will. The next few weeks were strange. Helen tried reaching out several times. First it was texts, then phone calls, then messages through Ryan's dad. Thomas called once and said gently, your mother didn't mean any harm. Ryan told him the same thing he told Helen. She accused Kelly of negligence. That's serious. After that, the calls stopped. Life got noticeably calmer. No tense Sunday dinners. No passive-aggressive comments. Just quiet. At work, everything went back to normal too. Maria joked about the investigation a few weeks later. Looks like someone had a personal grudge, she said. I smiled and said, something like that. The hospital closed the case completely. No mark on my record. No consequences. But sometimes I still think about how close it came. One anonymous email. That's all it took for HR to open an investigation into my career. If my supervisor hadn't trusted my work history, things might have gone very differently. One night a couple months later, Ryan and I were sitting on the couch watching TV. He muted the screen and looked at me. You ever think about talking to her again? I considered the question for a moment. Then I said, do you? Ryan shook his head slowly. Not unless she actually understands what she did. We sat there quietly for a few seconds. Then he reached over and squeezed my hand. I should have defended you sooner, he said. You defended me when it mattered. Ryan smiled slightly. Still, he said. I'm glad I finally saw it. Sometimes I think about Helen sitting in her house in Prattville, still convinced she was trying to save our marriage. The strange part is, our marriage actually became stronger after everything happened. Because when the moment came, Ryan didn't hesitate. He chose me. And honestly, I still wonder something. If you were in our situation, would you have cut contact too? Or do you think we overreacted to someone who claims she was only trying to help?